Today we're taking a couple expensive West Elm items and seeing if they can be DIY'd. Hi there, I'm Alli and welcome to my channel. Today I have 3 West Elm DIYs for you where I'm taking products from their website that are very expensive and trying to DIY them for a significantly lower price. The first item that I'm tackling in this video is this Harley tabletop planter, which retails for $50, and I have come up with a very unique way to recreate this planter that uses a lot of Dollar Tree items and things you probably already have in your craft stash. I'm starting with this Dollar Tree plastic flower pot. I thought the ribbed texture would be similar to the West Elm version, except for this one has horizontal versus the vertical ribs on that planter. And the first thing I did was take this and give it 2 coats of primer following the instructions on the spray can. Once the primer was dry, I then went in with some white spray paint and I took 2 coats of the white spray paint to completely cover the flower pot. And since I wanted this to have a glossy ceramic type look, I used some clear glaze spray paint over top of the white. Of course, you could skip this step if you'd use a glossy white spray paint in the previous step. Now, my secret ingredient to make the base of this flower pot is a cat dish. I thought a Dollar Tree cat bowl would have the perfect shape for the base of the flower pot. Then to give it that wood look, I'm using this contact paper. Now this is contact paper brand, but I did see pretty much this exact same at Dollar Tree, so you could definitely save some money and get a roll of this for $1 because you don't need much for this project. I cut down a small strip and then just removed the entire backing. I don't know if that was the best move, but that's just what I did. And I began applying it to the bowl. Now, obviously, this bowl has a little bit of a weird shape, so the trick to make sure that the contact paper can kind of bend and mold to the shape of the bowl is by using a hair dryer, or if you happen to have a heat gun. But I found my hair dryer was perfectly fine, and I just worked with the hair dryer and pulling and tightening up the contact paper until I made it all the way around the bowl. And I kind of messed this up a little bit because if you do it at the right angle, you wouldn't have to piece the contact paper together, but I wasn't really paying attention, so I ended up having to piece the contact paper together just a little bit, but you know, you can't really see the seams, so it's not a huge deal. Is removable instead of permanent contact paper, I did use some hot glue to kind of reinforce the edges on both the inside and the bottom of the bowl. And to kind of hold together where I had these seams, I used some satin Mod Podge. I just gave it one really light coat, and that was the perfect amount. And it also adds a little bit of a faux veneer finish to the piece. Now, 24 hours later, because I had to wait for that spray paint to dry, I just used E6000 glue to attach the cat bowl to the bottom of the flower pot. I decided not to do the kind of mix of hot glue in E6000 and just opted to just use the E6000 because I really wanted a strong hold and was kind of afraid the hot glue would sort of melt what I had here. And I weighted it down with a can of spray paint until the glue dried. Again, the planter that I'm recreating cost $50, and for me, it only cost me $3 to make because I already had the spray paints, but if you had to buy these spray paints, it would cost you around $10 to $15 to make. The next item that I'm recreating is this Candice Luter Kimono Wall Art, which retails for $620. Now, I will get into this a little bit in the DIY, but this piece is made by an artist that West Elm sells, but I do want to kind of pull some inspiration from it and make my own smaller version of the piece that is very inexpensive. In order to make this piece of wall art, I'm using a bunch of these Dollar Tree nautical ropes. I think I only ended up using 3 instead of all 5 that you see pictured here. And I started using a piece of scrap Dollar Tree foam core that I already had on hand, and I traced a circle out onto it. You could use a bowl or whatever you might have that is a circular shape. This is actually one of those small Dollar Tree mirrors. And I used my scissors to cut it out. Craft knife probably would have been better, but you know, scissors work. And after I got the arch shape, I then shortened it down a little bit. And then I brought in a pack of the rope just to get an idea of how wide to make this arch that I'm going to be forming, and then used my ruler and then a smaller little bowl to form the inner arch. And now it is time to begin gluing the rope down. I made sure to leave a generous amount of rope to make the tail, and then use hot glue on the very edge of this foam piece that I cut out, because you don't want to see the foam. You kind of want the rope to kind of hang off the edge of the foam just a little bit to hide it and conceal this as the background. So then I just hot glued all the way around the arch and stuck the rope down. And then I went and used my scissors to trim off the excess at the same length as the tail on the other side. And that gives you plenty of rope to use that same piece of rope to go all the way around the arch again. And you are left with a little excess. And my hack here is just to put a little hot glue on the end so that the excess that you're left over with doesn't fray. Now, as I'm finishing gluing down the rope, I do want to say that I believe this piece sold on West Elm's site, and there are a few other ones that are actually created by an artist who hand makes these and then West Elm sells them. That's why I'm not recreating this exactly like the West Elm product, because I want it to be inspired by this artist, but I don't want to be duplicating what they're doing. And I definitely recommend, if you have the money to support artists, whether it's this artist in particular or any artist, to choose that instead of trying to duplicate or recreate their work. Once I had all the rope glued down, I used my craft knife to just kind of refine any of the areas where you could kind of see the foam sticking out on the edges. And then I took a piece of Dollar Tree cotton twine and I glued that down on the back, and then used a popsicle stick that I cut down into a smaller piece to reinforce the string on both sides of the arch. Now, the piece that I'm recreating had a piece of wood that kind of goes across the bottom of the arch shape. So I had this piece of bosswood in my stash from previous projects, and I just cut it down into a smaller piece. I didn't even measure it, so I'm not exactly sure how big this was. And I just used some hot glue to attach it to the front of the rope. The next step is to untwist all of the ropes up to the part where the foam starts. So I did that on all of the pieces. And once I completed that, the trick to get the nice, clean, frayed looking rope is to actually use one of these wire dog brushes. I just got this at Dollar Tree so that it was super cheap, because I know that these types of brushes are pretty expensive, and this just works to really make the fringe look great. Then once it was hanging up, I gave it a little bit of a haircut, and that completes this project. The total cost to make this came in around $5 to make, and the original piece was $620. Of course, the original piece is way larger. This third DIY, I'm going to be recreating these marble onyx coasters. They come in a set of 4, and I think that these can be made super easily using polymer clay, plus a couple other really easily accessible materials. So let's go into this project. To recreate this set of coasters, I am using a couple different polymer clays. I have white, black, a light greenish kind of color, and then this really fun translucent clay. First up, I'm mixing my colors so that I have all of the colors that I want. I decided to make a light gray, a medium gray, and a dark gray, along with a light green, and then that mixed up the greener color, and then also mixed up the translucent and the white, just so that it was all nice and soft and ready to work with. Now we're going to be marbling the clay. So to do this, what you need to do is take your clay and roll it out to make a nice little snake like this. And you just repeat that with all of the colors that you want in the order that you want. It doesn't really matter too much, though I did find that you do want to go light-handed on the darker colors and also want to go a little bit light on the green and focus heavily on the white. That's going to give you the best marbled effect. So on the one that you see me making here, I did go a little bit too dark with a little bit too much dark gray and black, but in the end it did end up turning out pretty cute. So once you have all of your pieces, then you just start twisting them all together like so. And then you can begin folding and rolling. You want to sort of mix it and blend it, but not to the point where it's going to turn just one color. You're starting to create a marbled look. And for this first one that you see me making here, I actually don't think I mixed it enough. I'll show you how I fix that in a little bit. But then you will be so proud of me because I actually have a rolling pin now. I have not had a rolling pin. I've never owned one, and now I finally have one for my clay projects, and it's actually for fondant because the fondant rolling pin in the baking section at the craft store was way cheaper than the polymer clay rolling pin, so that's an interesting fact for you. So after I got that one coaster done, I wanted to make this a set of 4, so I just repeated all of those steps until I had all of my coasters. But as you'll see here with this one that I made, you'll notice that the blending was so much better and it looks so much more like the actual West Elm marbled pieces. And even as an extra detail, I decided to go in with a little bit of the translucent clay and put it in very thin pieces over the top and blend them in with my finger before rolling them down, and this really added to that effect. And if you do find you have a clay piece that you didn't think was blended well enough, you can just go back in and remix it a little tiny bit to get it a bit more blended and then re-roll it out. And you'll find that it looks so much better than when it wasn't completely mixed. But remember, you can always mix it more, but you can't reverse it. Next, I put all my little coasters onto a baking sheet lined with parchment paper, and I put it in the oven following my clay's instructions. Once they were out of the oven and cooled, I used some fine grit sandpaper and I sanded down all of the edges to make them nice and flat. And my trick when sanding is actually doing it over like a grocery bag. That way you don't get the sanding mess all over your table. Then I went in with this gloss polymer clay glaze, and I'm actually pretty sure this is exactly the same as a water-based varnish. So you could save a little bit of money by going with that option instead of this specific branded one. But it did create a really pretty glossy look on top of these coasters and started to really make them look like marble. Now I let these coasters dry completely overnight, and then as the finishing touch, I'm going in with this brass gilding paint and going over all of the edges. Now when you do this, you want to make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area because this is very strong smelling. And you also want to use a brush that you don't mind having to toss out when this is over because it dries so quickly that it's almost impossible to save your brush. And once that gilding paint dries, that finishes this cute set of coasters. Now the total cost for this project at regular price is $20 because clay is expensive. However, if you have a coupon for the craft store, this would probably come in right around the $15 mark to make these 4 really pretty looking coasters. And of course, that still beats the original $40 cost for coasters. I don't know anybody who wants to spend $40 on a set of coasters. And that's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I love doing this series. It is so much fun. If you want to check out all of the episodes of this I Can DIY That series, I will have that linked in the description box. And if you have any suggestions for stores that you want to see in the future, let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!